This is the tutorial for the Galaxy Colors Lab. In this lab, you'll see how we can use a spreadsheet full of data as a tool to help us answer questions about galaxies. As with any good research, the answers to the questions we ask here can lead to more questions further down the line. A galaxy is a collection of billions of stars, all held together by gravity. We live inside a galaxy we call the Milky Way. But there are hundreds of billions of galaxies in the observable universe. Galaxies come in a range of different sizes and shapes. The two most important categories of galaxies are spirals and ellipticals. Spiral galaxies fit the classic picture of a galaxy, a large disk of stars with two or more spiral arms inside them, with a bright bulge of stars in the center. Depending on how they're oriented from our point of view, they may seem to be circular with obvious arms, more elongated, or we may just see a thin disk edge-on with a bulge in the middle. Spiral galaxies have active star formation going on in their disks, especially in the spiral arms. Elliptical galaxies have less obvious structure. They generally appear either round or oval-shaped with a smooth distribution of brightness across them. In general, elliptical galaxies have very little star formation happening inside them, since they have very little of the gas that goes into making new stars. The colors of galaxies depend on the colors of the stars that make them up. In particular, if the most luminous stars are mostly blue, like blue main sequence stars and supergiants, then the galaxy will look blue. On the other hand, if the most luminous stars are red giant stars, then the galaxy will tend to look red. One of the first steps in this lab is to make your own hypothesis about galaxy colors. Use what you know about how stars evolve, along with what you know about the stellar populations of spiral and elliptical galaxies, to make a hypothesis about what colors you should expect for these galaxies. Make sure you explain clearly why you expect the colors you do. Galaxy Zoo was one of the first big citizen science projects. The idea was to make a large number of galaxy images available to members of the public and ask them to categorize what type of galaxy each was. It turns out that humans are much better than computers at looking at a picture and identifying what type the galaxies are. The Galaxy Zoo project resulted in 1 million galaxies being categorized by over 150,000 volunteers worldwide, and it has inspired dozens of other citizen science projects in all different fields of science. Each galaxy was categorized by many different people. If most of those people agree on the type of galaxy, then we can be pretty confident that they're right. If the results are more mixed, then the type of galaxy may be more uncertain. In this lab, we'll use the Galaxy Zoo data to answer a basic question about galaxies. What colors are they? In particular, is there a systematic difference in colors between spirals and ellipticals? Which ones are redder or bluer? The survey that the Galaxy Zoo data is based on includes the absolute magnitudes of galaxies in different parts of the spectrum. This is done by taking images of the galaxies through different colored filters. The magnitudes we'll be focusing on in this lab are the ones measured through the R, or red filter, and the G, or green filter. To get the overall color of a galaxy, we subtract the magnitudes in the R and G filters, G minus R. Effectively, we're asking if the galaxy is producing more green or red light. If you've seen B minus V colors in previous assignments, this is a similar idea, but with different filters. Remember that the magnitude system runs backwards, so lower or more negative numbers means brighter. This means that it's the lower G minus R values that reflect bluer galaxies, while higher numbers mean redder galaxies. The data we'll be using is given on spreadsheets. The data is provided in both Microsoft Excel and Google document formats. You're welcome to use either version. In this presentation, I'll work with the Google spreadsheet on a laptop. The instructions in the lab write-up were developed for Google on a tablet instead, so the controls may look a little different. Nonetheless, all versions of these do have controls to do the things you're asked to do. If you have trouble finding the controls on your spreadsheet to do what we're doing here, make sure you contact your instructor right away so that they can help you with that. Your instructor will make the spreadsheets available to you. You should pick one of the files. Each file has 2,000 galaxies in it, with each line representing a different galaxy. Make your own copy of this spreadsheet to work with. There are several columns in the spreadsheet representing different types of information about the galaxies, including their RA and DEC, redshift, brightnesses through different filters, masses, shapes, and distances from other galaxies. There is also a column with links to images and still more data on each galaxy. Finally, there are two columns that list the probability that each galaxy is a spiral or elliptical, based on the number of people who identified it as each type. The columns we'll be using in this lab are the p-elliptical and p-spiral, the probability that the galaxies are either elliptical or spiral, and Gmag and Rmag, the absolute magnitudes through the green and red filters. The first thing we need to do with this data is find the G-R color of these galaxies. To do this, we start by creating a new column on the table right after the Rmag column. At the top, label it G-R. To calculate the values of G-R, go to the first cell below the titles and type in an equal sign. Click on the cell in the same row but in the Gmag column, then type a minus sign. And finally, click on the cell in this row in the Rmag column. When you hit the return key, the spreadsheet calculates the value of G-R. This version of Google Sheets then suggests an autofill, in which it carries the same calculation all the way down to the bottom of the table. If the version you're using does this, select the check mark to OK this. It saves you time here. If you don't get that option, click and hold the small square in the bottom right corner of the cell, and then slide your cursor down the column to the bottom of the table. This will have the same effect of repeating the calculation for all of the galaxies in the table. When you do a calculation like this, it's a good idea to do a quick spot check and make sure it looks like the spreadsheet is doing the calculation you want it to do. In that first line, the values of Gmag and Rmag are both around minus 21. So when you subtract them, the difference should be less than 1. And that's what we see here. So it looks like we set up the calculation correctly. The next step is to find all of the galaxies in this spreadsheet that we can be confident are spirals and ellipticals. We'll start by finding the elliptical galaxies. Make a new copy of the spreadsheet and rename this one Ellipticals. At the top of the p-ellipticals column, select the arrow to pull up the drop-down menu and then sort the sheet from Z to A. This will put all of the galaxies with the highest probability of being ellipticals at the top of the column. Make sure that you're sorting the entire sheet, not just the p-ellipticals column. You'll know it's working correctly if the p-spirals column starts with a line of zeros, meaning that the galaxies that have a 100% probability of being ellipticals also have a 0% probability of being spirals. Once you've got the spreadsheet sorted, scroll down until you find when p-elliptical drops below 0.80. That means there is an 80% chance that these galaxies are ellipticals. Select all of the lines below this 80% mark so that you've selected every galaxy with a less than 80% chance of being elliptical. Make sure you select all of the columns, not just the p-elliptical one. Use the Edit Delete command to delete all of these rows. This means your table is now much shorter than before. In this case, I've gone from 2,000 lines to a little over 200. But these 200 are all galaxies that I know are ellipticals. Once you've created this page of elliptical galaxies, go back to your original copy of the data table and make a new copy titled Spirals. Repeat the same steps as we just went through, except that you should sort the table using p-spiral instead of p-elliptical. You'll then select all of the galaxies with values of p-spiral below 80% and delete these rows. Again, this will give you a shorter table, this time with just the galaxies that have a high probability of being spirals rather than ellipticals. Now you should create histograms of the 3 spreadsheet pages you've created. I'll show you what this looks like for ellipticals. First, select the G-R column in the table. Once you have that, use the Insert command to insert a chart. This may default to a scatter plot, but you can use the drop-down menu in the chart controls to select a histogram instead. This should give you a chart that looks like this, showing the number of galaxies in each color range. Once you've got the ellipticals histogram done, go ahead and make histograms for the spirals and the full table. The histogram gives a good visualization of the distribution of galaxy colors, but we also want to describe it numerically. The best way to do that is to find the average and the standard deviation of the G-R values. To find the average, you'll need to go to the bottom of the table. You may have to add one more line to the table so that you've got a place to work below the galaxy data. In the cell below the bottom of the G-R data, type in an equal sign, then the word average in capitals, then open parenthesis. Inside the parenthesis, type in the cell references for all of the G-R data. In this case, that's column K going from row 2 all the way to row 234. So you type K2 colon K234. Then you close the parenthesis. In this example, the average comes out to 0.75. Next, we want the standard deviation. The standard deviation is a measure of how wide the distribution is. The larger the standard deviation, the larger the range of colors we see in these galaxies. If the standard deviation is small, the galaxies are all around the same color. While if it's big, there are many galaxies that are much bluer and much redder than the average. You find the standard deviation in much the same way we did the average. Go to the cell next to where you put the average and type in an equal sign, STDEV, open parenthesis, and then the range of cells we used before. In my case here, it's K2 to K234 again. Then close the parenthesis and hit return. Again, once you do these calculations for one page, repeat these steps for the other 2. This will give you a good idea of how the colors of spirals and ellipticals compare to galaxies in general. The last step in working with the spreadsheet here is to trim down the tables further by seeing how many blue ellipticals and red spirals there are. We'll define the boundary between blue and red galaxies as G-R equals 0.6. Any galaxy with a smaller G-R value than this will be considered blue, while larger values will be considered red. So start with your ellipticals page. Make another copy of this table and title it Blue Ellipticals. Then sort the data using the G-R column. Since we want to focus on the bluest galaxies, we want the small numbers on top. So choose the A to Z sort here. Then you'll want to delete all of the galaxies with G-R values larger than 0.6. Don't be surprised if you don't have many galaxies left. Then do the same thing for the spirals. Make another copy of the spirals table and sort it by G-R values. This time, put the large G-R values on top and delete all of the galaxies with G-R lower than 0.6. This gives you a count of how many elliptical galaxies are blue and how many spirals are red. You can use that to test your hypothesis of what colors you expect for these galaxy types. At the end of the lab, there is a series of questions you should answer about your results. This is a chance to reflect on what you've learned about galaxy colors and how well the results matched up with your expectations at the start of the lab. It's okay if what you find doesn't match perfectly with your hypothesis. That's an important part of the scientific process and a key way we learn about the universe. The first two questions ask you to summarize the main findings of the lab and interpret what it means physically about the galaxies. Do you feel like you understand why galaxies have the colors they do? Questions 3 and 4 are asking you to be more precise. Give the data here about how many red spirals and blue ellipticals you found. What fraction of the totals were these? Remember that if your explanation said that a particular type of galaxy would be a particular color, then the galaxies that don't fit that color need a different explanation. If it's only 1 or 2 galaxies, that may mean something very unusual happened with those. But if there's a significant fraction of galaxies that are the wrong color, then that means our expectations about galaxy colors may need to be revised. It's not good enough to just say most galaxies of this type fit when a quarter or a third of them don't. This leads us to question 5. If you've got galaxies that don't seem to fit your expectations, what else could you look for to try to determine why they don't fit? In particular, have another look at the original spreadsheet and the many different columns of information given to describe these galaxies. Can any of these help you test your ideas about why some of the galaxies seem like the wrong color? The last question asks you to go back to your hypothesis and decide how it fits with the data. Don't just talk about majorities here. Make sure you address whether there are significant numbers of galaxies that don't fit your expectations and what that might mean about these galaxies. Once you've answered these questions, make sure you turn in your hypothesis, all of your spreadsheets and histograms, and the answers to the questions at the end.